Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I want to share with you 8 Halloween stories from the Appalachian Mountains, where isolated houses and leaf-covered roads can hide a secret for an entire season. There, porch lights may flicker on even when no one is near, and people still whisper, if you hear a knock at midnight, it's best not to answer. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and tell me where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have started not far from where you are. Now then, let's begin. I moved into the cabin on Hollow Road just over a month before Halloween. It sat halfway up a sloped gravel drive, tucked behind a scrim of bare-limbed poplars. The neighbors were scattered thinly along the ridge, and the nearest porch light I could see at night was a good 200 yards off. It was the kind of quiet I used to think I wanted. My name's Aaron. I'm 29, and I teach second grade at the elementary school, about 2 miles down the valley. Moving here felt like starting over in a good way. Most evenings, I'd make tea, read, maybe call my sister if I could get reception. Halloween night was colder than I expected. I had planned to stay in, maybe reread Rebecca with a blanket and a mug of cider. Trick-or-treaters didn't come this far up anyway. The road was too steep and poorly lit, and there weren't enough houses to make it worth a kid's time. Still, just in case, I'd left a small bowl of candy outside. It was more of a gesture than anything. Around 9, after finishing a chapter, I turned off the TV and stood up to rinse my mug. That's when I heard the knock. 3 of them. Light, evenly spaced. It came from the front door, sharp against the wood. I opened it, expecting to see some brave kid in costume, maybe someone whose parents drove them up. But the porch was empty. No footsteps on the path. Just a small paper bag resting neatly on the mat, tied with a bright orange ribbon. I picked it up, smiling. Kids playing a Halloween prank. Ding Dong Ditch, Appalachian edition. I set the bag on the table and locked the door again. When I glanced back at it a few minutes later, the ribbon was untied. I didn't remember doing that. The bag looked deeper somehow, and when I peered inside, it was completely empty. A draft slid under the front door, and the porch light flickered once, maybe twice. I pulled on my hoodie and went to secure the windows. Probably the wind. Old cabin, after all. An hour passed without anything strange. I was nearly asleep on the couch when the second knock came, this time from the back door. 3 knocks again. Firmer. More deliberate. I turned on the porch light out back. Nothing but the short stoop and the woods beyond, pale under the moonlight. I waited, watching the trees for movement. When I stepped back inside, my phone buzzed. Weak signal, but one notification got through. Motion detected, front door camera. I pulled up the feed. A figure stood just barely in frame. Backlit and still. Short. Maybe child-sized. Wearing what looked like a pointed hood or a hat. No movement for nearly 20 seconds. Then the image blurred, and the figure was gone. I didn't know whether to laugh or call someone. Reception was near useless out here, and I didn't have a landline. I checked both doors again, made sure they were locked. The paper bag still sat on the table, crumpled now, as if someone had reached inside. I'll admit something here. I wasn't scared yet. Not really. But I remember telling myself, you're just new here. The woods have a voice of their own. Looking back, I think I was trying to drown out something my gut had already picked up. At exactly 11, it happened again. 3 knocks, this time from both doors at once. I stood frozen in the center of the living room. Then I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. I started to dial 911, but the screen blinked and dropped to 0 bars. The porch light showed something new now. A handprint. Muddy, 5 fingers splayed, pressed against the window pane of the front door. The glass vibrated slightly when I moved closer, catching my reflection beside that smeared print. Then came the 4th knock. Louder. Heavier. The whole pane trembled, I dropped to the floor and crawled behind the sofa, pulling the blanket down with me. The flashlight was still in my hand, its beam catching the corner of a picture frame as I shifted. I clicked it off. Every light in the cabin went dark. For a few long seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then the knocking stopped. I thought maybe it was over, until I heard footsteps. Slow, steady ones, creaking along the wooden porch boards. They circled the house, from one side to the other. Then a voice came, muffled and low, like it was pressed behind fabric. Trick or treat. It dragged out, drawn through clenched teeth or maybe some kind of mask. I barely breathed. My phone was recording in my hand, but when I played it back, all I heard was wind and static, like the voice had never been there. I crawled toward the back room and cracked the window open. The cold hit me first, followed by the sound of dry leaves rustling outside. I pushed the screen out and lowered myself through. My foot hit the ground hard, but I didn't stop. I ran across the yard, behind the rusted pickup parked near the tree line. From there, I turned and looked back at the cabin. The porch light was on, both doors still shut. It felt like nothing had happened. I told myself maybe it really had been a kid. Maybe I imagined the voice. The camera had glitched before. Maybe the footsteps were just echoes in old wood. After a minute, I started walking back. I locked both doors again, pulled the blinds, and curled up on the couch with the flashlight still in my lap. I didn't sleep. Not really. But the night stayed quiet for a while. Until 3 in the morning. The knocking starts again. 3 taps. But this time, it is not at the door. It comes from inside the wall, right behind the couch. I jump up and aim the flashlight. There is nothing there. Just the old pine wall with its faded grain and a single crack running down the middle. I kneel, move in close. The beam catches something inside the split. A finger, wet with mud, pushing through the crack like it knows where I am. I scream. The tip brushes my cheek before I fall backward. I scramble to the door, fingers shaking as I pull the chain lock free. I do not look back. The moment the door flies open, I bolt for the woods, barefoot, cold. Branches slice past my arms, and I do not care. Behind me, the porch light flickers out. The whole house sinks into darkness again. But the knocking doesn't stop. 3 knocks. Then another 3. Coming now from all sides. It took the sheriff's department a week to get back to me. By then, I had already moved into a month-to-month rental closer to town, staying with a friend from the school. They said the cabin was empty. No forced entry. No signs of animals. Just a stain. A muddy handprint with only 3 fingers, right where the wall had cracked. I've never gone back. I leave the lights on now, even when I sleep. And every Halloween night, just after 3, I hear it again. Not loud. Not at the door. Just a soft rhythm behind the wall. 3 knocks. From the inside. Every night at 11:07, the porch light came on. And every night, I turned it off. It became a routine. The kind that sinks into your bones without you realizing. The sensor clicked. The light buzzed to life. And I'd walk over and flip the switch like clockwork. My name's Neil. 35. Work in IT from home. I moved out here to a rental place on the ridge after the divorce. The trees keep the world at a distance, and I used to think that was a good thing. The house is small but clean, pale siding, wrap-around porch, glass front door that catches the sun in the morning and the moon at night. Marion, North Carolina, is just close enough for groceries and just far enough to feel like no one can reach you unless you want them to. I used to like Halloween. I even carved pumpkins a couple years ago. This year, though, I didn't bother. No decorations, no candy, not even a bowl on the steps. The first time the light came on while I was standing right by the door, I figured it was a glitch. I had just finished doing dishes and was drying my hands when the sensor popped. Porch flooded with light. I opened the door and looked out. No wind. No squirrels. Nothing. I switched the light off. I went back to my desk. But it bothered me. You don't think much of one motion sensor until it starts acting like it knows you. The next night, it turned on at 10:53. I remember because I was in the middle of a video call. I glanced out the window, and there it was, glowing like someone had stepped onto the porch. I replaced the sensor. No change. I reset the smart hub and ran a diagnostic through the app. Still the same. I even angled a security camera out the window to catch whatever was tripping it. That night, the light flared on 3 separate times. The camera didn't catch a thing. One night I turned off the porch light, then shut off the TV. The moment the screen went black, the light came on again, almost like it had been waiting. I stood in the hallway and looked toward the door. The glass reflected the inside of the house faintly, but when the light hit it, something strange happened. My reflection lagged, just for a blink. Not in any obvious way, but enough that I noticed it. I walked right up to the glass and stared at it. Everything seemed normal again, but I pressed my palm to the door and watched as my hand touched the surface. And then, half a second later, the reflection caught up. It was just weird enough to keep me up. I started logging the time each night. The pattern got tighter. October 29th. The light came on at 10:58. October 30th. 10:51. Halloween night. It stayed dark longer than I expected, and I almost let myself believe it was over. At 10:41, it lit up. I was already on the couch, facing the door. No wind. No leaves blowing. Just that steady amber glow washing over the porch. I waited. Did not move. The light went off after a minute. At 10:58, it came on again. I didn't get up this time. Just watched. When the clock hit 11:07, I stood up slowly. The light flared on for the third time. That was its rhythm, always 3. I stepped closer to the door. Just as I reached for the handle, a shadow formed across the glass. Not outside. Not moving. A human shape. Still. Upright. Arm raised like it was about to knock. But I hadn't moved. And the porch. Empty. I backed away from the glass and went straight to the kitchen. My hand found the drawer handle and the old paring knife I kept for cutting fruit. It looked ridiculous in my grip, but it was the only thing sharp enough to make me feel less helpless. I shut off every light inside the house, leaving only the glow from the porch. The living room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I opened the camera feed on my phone. The screen showed the porch light glowing, steady and bright. Yet in the house, no light came through the door. The glass stayed dark, like the glow belonged to somewhere else. I pushed the door open just a crack and stepped out. The moment my foot touched the porch, the light went out. I stood there in the dark with the night pressing close. The woods stretched black and silent around me, and I could hear the low trickle of the creek down the slope. I waited for the light to blink on again. It didn't. When I went back inside, I almost laughed. Stress. That was all it was. I worked too much. Slept too little. I even wrote a short blog post about it, about how fear can make you see patterns that are not there. I wrote, maybe the real problem isn't the light turning on. Maybe it's the part of me that needs to know why. At some point, that line stopped feeling clever. Around midnight, I shut the laptop. The screen went black, and for half a second, I thought I saw my reflection again in the glass of the door. Only, it didn't move when I did. I leaned forward, just enough to notice it standing completely still. My stomach dropped. I turned the light switch twice. The bulb flickered but held steady, glowing pale yellow across the porch. And there I was, or someone wearing my shape, standing outside, looking in. He did not breathe. He did not blink. He just stood there in that same soft light, as if waiting for me to notice him fully. Then the porch light cuts out. Total black. A single sound. The door slamming open. Cold air hit me in the face. The smell of wet earth followed. I swung the knife forward and felt it strike something solid. Maybe wood. Maybe the door frame. Then fingers grabbed my wrist, pressing into the skin with a grip too human to doubt. A voice hissed in my ear. I just wanted to know, if I were you, would you open the door? Whoa. I shouted and lunged backward. The knife slipped. My shoulder hit the floor. When I looked up, the room was empty. The light overhead blinked on, harsh and bright, showing nothing but open space and a swinging door. Outside, the porch light glowed again. Calm. Ordinary. I never fixed that sensor. I just stopped using it. Now I keep the inside lights on all night and the curtains closed. The porch stays dark. I tell myself it was a trick of reflection, a projection from some passing car, anything. But every year, when Halloween comes, I still unplug the porch light entirely. Last year, a neighbor called around midnight. He sounded half amused, half uneasy. "Hey, Neil," he said. "There's someone standing in front of your door. The light's off, but I can see him clear as day. And it's sign. My name's Shane. I was 27 when my father passed and left me the house in Clay County. I came back that Halloween to start cleaning it out. It had been 6 years since I last stepped foot on the porch. The house sat at the edge of the woods, just beyond a long gravel curve where the trees leaned in close. Growing up, I used to think the place felt too far from the world, but my dad had always liked it that way. After my mom died, he rarely came into town. Most nights he sat out back with a drink and a cigar, talking to no one on his old CB radio. I found the radio on the second day, tucked under a pile of old tarps in the garage. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust covered the dial, and the microphone cord was tangled around the base. Out of habit, I turned the knob. A red light flickered once, then faded out. I left it there, figuring it was just dead. Later that night, I crashed early. The air smelled like old wood and dry leaves, and I was too tired to think much about anything. At exactly 10:19, something clicked on in the garage. I froze. Then came the voice. My dad's voice. "Open the back door. Son, I'm home." Him. I stood up, heart knocking around in my ribs. I hadn't played any recordings. That CB had no memory, no storage. I checked the power cord that morning. It wasn't even plugged in. I told myself maybe I was dreaming. Maybe it was a fluke. A neighbor's signal bleeding through. Someone with a similar tone. But it said my name. And it came at the exact minute Dad used to call when I was in college, just to check in. The next night, I stayed up, sat in the kitchen with the lights off and listened. At 10:19, the red light blinked on by itself. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. "Open the back door. Shane. Hurry up." That's saying the... I stepped outside with a flashlight. The back steps were empty. No footprints. No rustling leaves. Just the cold and the sound of my breath. I scanned the yard, then turned toward the old rocking chair. The one Dad used every fall. It had always faced the woods. Now it was turned inward, facing the house. I went back inside and flipped through every frequency on the CB. Every channel came up static, except for channel 19. That one stayed crystal clear, but only when he spoke. Each time I heard the voice, it was followed by a soft background crackle, like rainfall on a metal roof. But there had been no rain for over a week. I started leaving the radio unplugged completely. Still, every night at 10:19 press, the red light blinked to life. I stopped answering, but I never stopped listening. On Halloween night, I made coffee and sat on the workbench across from the CB. No distractions, no music, just me, the static, and a kitchen knife I didn't know what to do with. At 10:18, silence. At 10:19, the light blinked, but no voice. I waited. A minute passed. 2. Then my phone buzzed. One new voicemail. No number. I hit play. Open the back door. Shane. I'm home now. The voice paused. Then came one more line. And I'm not alone. Dan just to these. I grabbed the flashlight and ran to the back door. I opened it. Someone stood 3 steps away, not moving, hands limp at their sides, head tilted like a question. I slammed the door shut and threw the bolt across. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor and hit the baseboard with a dull clack. The garage stayed silent after that, as if whatever was out there had stopped breathing. I dialed 911. No signal. The screen flickered and went blank. I tried again and again, moving around the kitchen, but the bars never came back. The house felt like it had sunk out of range of the world. That was when I heard the second CB. It came from the front porch. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain an inch. There it was, my father's backup unit sitting on the step, lit with the same red glow. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. The microphone cord hung loose, the speaker buzzing with that faint static rain. Then the voice, "Shane, open up. I told you I'm home. They's not what the nam. If you know cause is not K." I kicked the door open just long enough to send the radio tumbling off the porch. It hit the ground and went silent. I locked everything and ran to my father's old room, slamming the door behind me. For a while I just sat there on the floor with my back to the bed. The air smelled faintly of cigar smoke, though the house had been shut for weeks. I turned on the lamp and looked around. The walls were covered in framed photos. My father fishing, my parents together in the yard. A few faces I didn't recognize. One photo caught me. It showed Dad with 2 men, all 3 of them sitting in front of the house. The man on the left, the one with the slouched shoulders, was the same person I had seen behind the door earlier. Same build, same tilt of the head. I turned the picture face down and unplugged the lamp. Darkness felt safer somehow. My breath came shallow. I waited, counting the seconds like I was back in that static rhythm. At 11:57, the radio came on again. That familiar click. Then my father's whisper, "Don't open the back door. You know that, son." He salve. I sat frozen. The voice didn't sound angry or demanding anymore. It sounded frightened, like he was warning me from wherever he was. The air shifted then. A soft scrape came from the porch, slow and rhythmic, like something heavy being dragged. I leaned forward and peered through the gap between curtain and frame. The second CB radio was moving, inch by inch, sliding across the wooden boards toward the door, like someone was pulling it with fishing line. Every time it bumped forward, the figure in the yard twitched its head, just a little, watching, waiting. Then the radio spoke again, but the tone was different. "If you don't open, I'll come in another way." He was power. The glass in the window cracked. A hairline fracture ran across it, splitting the reflection of my own face in 2. My chest tightened. I turned on the light, but the yard was empty now. No radio. No man. Only wet footprints forming on the wood floor inside the room, one after another, leading toward me. I ran. I didn't even remember grabbing the keys. I just remember the engine roaring when it caught, the headlights slicing through fog as I drove down the hill. The house shrank behind me until it disappeared. I never went back. I sold the place cheap 2 weeks later. The buyer didn't ask many questions, and I didn't offer any. But every year since then, on Halloween night, my phone vibrates at 10:19, always from an unknown number. Always the same message. "Shane, open the back door. I'm home. Please self." I changed phones. I changed numbers. It still finds me. And every time I hear it, there's that faint background hiss. Soft, steady, like rain falling on a metal roof. But the sky stays dry, always dry. My name is May. I was 32 that fall, freshly divorced and worn thin from pretending I was fine. For Halloween week, I booked an Airbnb cottage in a small Appalachian town I had never been to. Just me, a few books, and the quiet I kept telling myself I needed. The cottage was charming. Wood floors, a little porch, big windows with wide ledges for plants or coffee mugs. The kind of place that made you feel like time had slowed down just for you. On the first day, the host had left a carved jack-o'-lantern by the front step, its face jagged but cheerful, with a tiny tea candle inside. I brought it in that night, set it by the window to keep the porch wind from blowing it out. I turned the face outward, toward the road. From the sofa, I could see it glowing gently, like a beacon. That first night, I slept better than I expected. But the next morning, the pumpkin had turned. It faced the living room now, eyes and smile staring toward the center of the couch, where I had been reading the night before. I stood there for a long moment, trying to remember if I had bumped it or moved it while cleaning. I chalked it up to habit. Maybe I had nudged it without noticing. I turned it back toward the road. Simple enough. That evening, I made tea and curled up again. The candlelight flickered softly in the pumpkin's grin. I read for an hour, then looked up. The light inside had gone out. I sighed, got up to check it. But before I reached the window, the candle blinked back on. It caught me off guard. Maybe the draft had snuffed it for a second. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the pattern. Each time I looked away, the candle flickered. Each time I turned back, it was steady again. By the third night, I started paying closer attention. I set the pumpkin on the kitchen table just to test myself. Later that night, around 2, I woke to a soft thud. I went down barefoot, expecting a dropped book or maybe the wind had knocked something loose. But there it was, the pumpkin, sitting in its original spot by the window, facing inward again. I checked the doors. Still locked. Windows too. Nothing out of place, except that one thing. I even told myself the host might have come by, which made no sense, but felt better than the alternative. Still, I moved the pumpkin again the next morning, put it in a shoebox, slid it into the cabinet under the sink. I even said out loud, "Let's take a break. You and me." That was Halloween night. Around 10, I turned on the porch light to let the silence settle. No trick-or-treaters had come. Not that I expected any. Just before heading to bed, I went to fill a glass of water, and stopped. The pumpkin was back in the window. Same spot, same tilt, candle flickering, box still under the sink, empty. I screamed. Not loud, but sharp. I ran for my phone, checked the locks again. All doors secure. No sign of break-in, nothing broken. And yet, something had changed. The carving knife the host left for kitchen use, the one I had used to cut an apple that morning, was gone. Not in the drawer, not in the sink, just gone. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the car. As I fumbled with the ignition, the porch light blinked off, then back on. In the window, the pumpkin stared, and behind it, for just a second, I saw the outline of someone inside. Someone who was not me. I hid behind the house until I caught my breath. The gravel was cold under my palms, and my knees were shaking so hard I could feel it through my jeans. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but the signal bar kept flashing in and out. All I could hear was the wind moving through the trees. I waited until the porch light turned off again. Then, I ran to the car and dug through the glove box for the spare key to the cottage. I told myself I needed proof that someone had broken in. Maybe I had imagined the shape behind the glass. Maybe the light had caught my reflection. I just needed to see it empty. The key turned with a soft click. I pushed the door open. The air inside was cold, heavier than before. The pumpkin was gone from the window. The candle, too. Every surface looked undisturbed, as if I had left it hours ago. I called out once, just to break the silence. Hello? This was nothing. I stepped through each room, checking the closets, the kitchen, the bathroom. No footprints, no open window, nothing missing. When I reached the living room again, I laughed a little. A dry, shaky sound that didn't feel like mine. Maybe I was having some kind of delayed panic. Maybe grief had finally caught up with me in a way I didn't expect. I went into the bedroom, locked the door, and left the lamp on. My suitcase sat by the dresser, still half-packed. I crawled under the blanket, fully dressed, and told myself I would drive out first thing in the morning. The clock glowed 1:54 when my eyes finally closed. At 3:05, I woke up freezing. The lamp was still on, but the air had changed. There was a faint scent of candle wax, sweet and burnt, like the smell that lingers after you blow out a flame. I turned my head toward the chair by the wall. The pumpkin sat there. Its face glowed faintly orange, light spilling through the cuts in the rind. I could see the flicker inside, a slow pulse like breathing. My heart kicked hard. I swung my legs off the bed, ready to run. That is when the closet door burst open. A man stumbled out, short, wiry, his hair matted. The carving knife glinted in his hand. His voice came out rough and cracked. "You locked it away," he shouted. "It likes the window. Data very crapses, they're not a getting out of the nines." I grabbed the bedside lamp and threw it. The base struck him on the forehead, and he staggered back. I bolted past him, through the door, down the hallway, and out the front entrance without looking behind me. The gravel cut into my bare feet as I sprinted for the car. I drove until I saw the first streetlight in town. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled into a gas station and waited there until dawn. When the police arrived, I led them back to the cottage. They searched every corner. No man, no footprints, no pumpkin, only a small patch of soot on the bedroom floor, where something had burned down to wax and ash, and above it, carved deep into the wall in jagged letters, "It has to look inside." I left that same night. Didn't even ask for a refund. I found another apartment 2 towns over. Smaller but bright. For a while, I almost forgot. Until a month later, when a plain brown box showed up at my new address. No return label. Just my name. Inside was the carving knife, streaked with wax. I didn't open it all the way. I shoved it under the bed. But every morning since, it has been on the table by the window, facing inward. I moved to Mountain Ridge on a Wednesday. A quiet town folded between low hills and pine. The kind of place that went dark early and stayed that way. I had just started a new accounting job and found a small rental in one of those new developments that look identical from every angle. Fresh paint, clean walls, and no history. That was the part I liked most. No one had lived there before me. The first couple of nights were uneventful. The Wi-Fi kept cutting out, but the cell signal was worse. So I didn't bother complaining. I unpacked, cooked simple dinners, and watched reruns on my laptop until I fell asleep on the couch. Everything felt comfortably blank. Then Friday night came. At 2:41 inches the morning. My phone lit up on the coffee table. I remember squinting at it in the dark and seeing my own name on the screen. Incoming FaceTime call. Lena. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for my sleepy brain to make sense of what I was seeing. Same number. Same contact photo. My phone was calling me. I let it ring until it stopped, assuming it was some kind of system glitch or network echo. When I checked the call log the next morning, it showed a missed call from myself at 2:37 a.m. Duration, 2 minutes. That detail bothered me. I told myself it was a phone bug, Apple doing Apple things. Still, I tried searching for answers online. There were stories about cloned devices and software mirroring, but nothing concrete. By the time I finished breakfast, I had almost convinced myself to forget it. The next night, I woke up again around the same time. This time, the call didn't show as missed. It was incoming. The same name, the same contact photo, but my face filled the preview window. Except it wasn't my face in real time. It was me, standing in the kitchen with the light on, wearing the same t-shirt I had fallen asleep in. I could see my phone lying on the table behind me in the frame. The feed glitched once, then went dark. I sat frozen, phone pressed to my ear, listening. No sound came through, except faint static, like someone breathing through a screen. When I checked the security camera app later, every motion alert had vanished. The only clip that remained was from earlier that evening, me locking the door at midnight. I checked the backup feed on iCloud just to be sure. There was one short, hidden recording I hadn't taken. It showed me turning toward the camera with a look I didn't recognize. Wide eyes, mouth open, as if about to shout. Then it cut out. That was when I began to write things down. The times, the dates, every tiny change. Each call came exactly at 2:37, never a minute off. By Halloween night, I decided to stay awake and watch. I set up my phone to record the moment, left the lights on, and sat on the floor with a blanket. At 2:36, the room felt heavier, like air pressing in from all sides. Then the screen lit up. Incoming call. Lena May. I let it ring once, twice. Then, silence. The call ended on its own. I opened the video file immediately. It showed the kitchen again. Same angle as before. Same harsh light over the counter. Only this time, I was standing there in the footage, barefoot, still in pajamas, except I hadn't moved from the living room. The recording ended abruptly. I crept toward the kitchen, whispering my own name like it would steady me. When I reached the doorway, the overhead light was on. I knew I hadn't touched the switch. Under the dining table, the dust had been smeared aside in a wide streak, the kind of mark you'd see if someone had been lying there, or crawling out. I turned off the light and backed away slowly, phone clutched to my chest. I kept repeating one sentence in my head, over and over. If I don't look, it can't look back. I packed a bag the next morning. I told myself it was just for the weekend, that I needed some time away. Still, I didn't really believe that. Every time I tried to delete the call history, it reappeared. Each entry marked the same time, 2:37 a.m. I left the lights on while I gathered my things. The phone sat face down on the counter, but I could feel it waiting. I caught myself glancing at it, half afraid it might light up again. I told myself, do not look, just leave. When I stepped onto the porch, the screen door creaked softly. I opened the car and tossed the bag in. That was when the phone buzzed. It wasn't a call this time. It was a video file opening on its own. The image froze me where I stood. It was my living room, exactly as it looked right now. My keys on the counter, the half-empty glass of water, and me, standing by the door, holding my bag. Then a voice whispered through the speaker. Open the door. You haven't left yet. That's no what. I turned, expecting someone behind me, but the house was still. Only the hum of the fridge, the faint rattle of the vent. My pulse sounded too loud inside my head. I could feel something close, not visible, but near enough that I could almost sense breath on the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. I ran to the car, slammed the door, and locked it. My phone rang again. The same name, Lena. I threw it onto the passenger seat and started the engine. Gravel kicked under the tires as I drove toward the main road. For the first few miles, I didn't look at the phone. I just drove, Once I reached town, I finally pulled over and opened the camera feed remotely. Every room in the house showed empty. I almost cried from relief. At my friend's place, I explained half the story. Not all of it. Just enough to sound anxious, but not insane. She let me stay the night on her couch. I slept hard, maybe 4 hours. At breakfast, she asked, "Why did you FaceTime me last night?" "In the prospectus, with you Bill that." I stared at her. "You called around 3, she said. "Your name popped up. I figured you changed your mind about staying." And as a fast descent, I grabbed my phone and checked the outgoing log. Nothing. No calls made. No messages sent. The time on her phone read 2:37 a.m. That was the moment I stopped telling myself it was a glitch. When I finally went back to the house the next evening, I reset everything. Router, Wi-Fi, phone, even the smart lock system. I changed passwords, deleted backups, and shut off the automated lighting. That night, I sat in bed reading until my eyes blurred. The air was still. Too still. For the first time in a week, no call came. At least not until the next night. 2:37 a.m. The ringtone broke the quiet. Incoming call. Lena home. The word home hadn't been there before. I held the phone, watching the screen glow against my fingers. The call connected itself before I could move. The image that filled the screen was black. No face. No light. Then a low voice whispered, steady and certain. "I'm inside. Thank you for unlocking everything." Shit. Every light in the house blinked on. The smart system, the lamps, even the hallway nightlight. One by one. Then I heard it. The faint sound of a door closing down the hall. I dropped the phone and ran outside. I moved out the next morning. New apartment. New number. New devices. Everything changed. But it didn't matter. Every year since then, at 2:37 a.m., whatever phone I own vibrates once. No name. No number. Just a single text that follows a minute later. "She's still here. Your copy." My name is Anders. I was 38 that fall. A freelance writer from Charlotte, trying to finish a manuscript that had stalled out somewhere around page 90. I rented a 100-year-old farmhouse up in the Smokies for 2 weeks, hoping the isolation would give me something the city could not. No meetings. No emails. No excuse to stop writing. The house sat on a ridge above a 2-lane road. White paint peeling in long strips. A stone chimney, dark with age. Inside, it was warmer than I expected. Wood floors, a narrow staircase, and a hallway that stretched toward the back, like the house was longer on the inside than it looked from out front. That hallway was where I first noticed the mirror. It was tall, maybe 6 feet, framed in dark wood carved with a strange pattern that looked like twigs pressed flat. The glass held a faint yellow tint, and something about it felt older than the rest of the house, like it had been brought in, not left behind. I found myself avoiding it during the day without meaning to. When I went upstairs to sleep, I kept my eyes forward. But that first night, I looked into it by accident, just a glance as I passed, and saw something that stuck with me. A thin crack near the center, almost the shape of a handprint. I stopped walking, turned around. The crack was still there, but now it looked smaller, fainter. I told myself it was just the mirror aging. These old things always came with stories and strange patterns. The wind picked up that night, rattling the windows and sliding leaves along the porch. I stayed up late writing, hunched under the desk lamp in the corner of the living room. Around midnight, I heard what sounded like a soft step in the hall. I paused, listened. It came again, lighter than a boot but heavier than the house settling. When I turned toward the hallway, I could just barely see the mirror in the gloom. And in it, myself. Only I was not sitting. I was standing. The reflection showed me at the edge of the bedroom door, head tilted like I had just stepped out to check the noise. But I was still in my chair, hands resting on the keyboard. I stood slowly. The image in the mirror held for a second, then disappeared as I got closer. I raised my hand to the glass, but all I saw now was empty hallway behind me and the dim shimmer of the bulb above. I tried cleaning the mirror the next morning. The crack was still there. That night, a new one appeared on the left side, smaller but deeper. I had not touched the thing since. The strange part was not just the cracks. It was the timing. Every time I stared into that glass, it lagged behind me. A blink, a breath, just long enough to feel like it was watching something besides me. I started tracking it. I would make small gestures, lift my hand, shake my head, and the mirror would follow, but always a fraction late. The reflections had no weight, but they held a kind of pressure, like walking into a room where someone had just left. Halloween night came cold and gusty. I stayed inside, typing through dinner, sipping cold coffee. The only light was the desk lamp behind me in the hallway sconce, which flickered now and then with the wind. Around 2 in the morning, I pushed back from the desk to stretch and looked up. There, in the mirror, a figure stood behind me. Not reflected, not in the glass. It was just a faint shadow shape, slender, head low, almost resting against the frame. I turned around fast. Nothing. But when I looked back, it was still there. I walked slowly to the switch at the end of the hall. The moment I flicked it, the bulb above the mirror went dark. All I could see was the faint glow of the lamp at my desk. The shape was gone. Then I heard the front door creak open. Just an inch. Just enough. But I had locked it hours ago. I crept to the front of the house. The door was shut again by the time I reached it, but the air in the room had changed. Cold draft, pine and dust, like someone had been standing there, holding the door just long enough to be noticed. I checked the lock. Still latched. Nothing on the porch but wind-blown leaves. I turned every light on downstairs, then dragged a chair to the hallway, took the mirror off the wall and leaned it face down against the wood floor. I covered it with an old flannel sheet I found in the hall closet. A ridiculous gesture maybe, but it helped. I sat back at the desk and tried to write, but every sentence looped back to the same place. The mirror. The sound of that soft footstep just behind my thoughts. By 1 in the morning, the wind had gone quiet. The creaks in the hallway stopped. Even the floor felt still under my feet. I told myself it was over, that I was tired and had let a crack in the glass write stories for me. When I stood and turned off the lamp, the light from the hallway switch flickered once. The mirror was still covered. The room dimmed to a soft glow, then brightened again when I flipped the switch back. Nothing moved, but I waited longer than I should have. I made it halfway up the stairs before I felt the change. That weight again, that wrongness in the air. I turned toward the hallway. The mirror, still wrapped, was gone. I ran down, art in my throat. I found it leaned against the wall again, this time upright. Sheet gone. The glass looked unbroken, but when I stepped in front of it, the reflection showed me halfway up the stairs. Not here. Not now. Behind that version of me, something was standing, lower to the ground, barefoot, watching. I turned around. Nothing. Then a sound, crackling like glass under strain. I looked back at the mirror. The figure stepped forward, out of the glass, into the hallway. His hand gripped a piece of the broken mirror frame, jagged and dark. His head tilted the same way I had seen before. He looked at me like someone studying their own face for the first time. He charged. I shoved him backward into the bookcase. The frame splintered, mirror falling in heavy shards. He hit the wall hard and staggered, catching himself on the floorboards. I grabbed my coat and keys and ran. I do not remember driving, only the sight in the rearview mirror. A thin face at the top of the stairs, watching through the dark glass as the house receded behind me. I never finished the manuscript. I left the farmhouse behind and returned to Charlotte with a hard drive full of notes and no will to open them. But that mirror, or what it showed, it's followed me. I keep a small mirror by my desk now. I never meant to, but it helps me check the room when I feel eyes on my back. On Halloween this year, just after midnight, I caught a flicker in the glass. A small figure, leaning, pressed lightly to the corner of the frame. I moved the mirror to the closet, removed the frame, covered it. But every few days, I forget and glance inside. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see my reflection blink a half second too late. I left that house, but the mirror stayed. And now I am starting to wonder what it is reflecting, because I am not sure it is me anymore. I was logging camera trap footage when I heard the first scratching. Just a soft, quick scrape at the front door. The kind that makes you pause. Not because it sounds dangerous, but because it is too small and too out of place to ignore. It was Halloween night. Fog had rolled in early and made the porch light useless. The air hung cold and damp, and the beams from my headlamp barely reached past the steps. My name's Cal. I was 42 then, working as a contract biologist, studying deer movement patterns in transitional forest zones. The grant let me rent a cabin near Cherokee National Forest for 6 weeks to gather night data. Closest neighbor was 20 minutes down the mountain, and cell signal gave up a mile from the ridge. The cabin itself was solid. 1 floor and a narrow loft above. 2 exits, both reinforced, and a shortwave radio in case something went wrong. I had been there 3 weeks without trouble. Wildlife passed through. I caught foxes on camera, a bear once, but nothing that came right up to the door. When the scratch came again, I paused the video feed. I stood and walked to the front. The porch creaked once under shifting air, but when I looked through the peephole, there was nothing, just fog and the outline of pine trees on either side of the drive. I figured it was a raccoon or maybe a lost dog. I turned back to the laptop. But around 10:30, the scratching returned. This time longer, slower, almost deliberate. I took the flashlight and aimed it through the slats of the window beside the door. That was when I saw it. An animal sat just beyond the porch rail, crouched low. At first I thought it was a coyote, narrow frame, fur mottled in the light. But the back was too high. The way it held still, too controlled. Its head was turned toward the door, unmoving. I grabbed a leftover packet of trail jerky and eased the door open just an inch. Cold air surged in. I tossed the jerky out near the bottom step and waited. The animal did not move, did not sniff. It stared directly into the gap of light spilling from the doorway. I waited for it to flinch, to react. It did not. But something else did. A low breath came through the crack in the door. Not a snarl, not a growl, just breath. Wet, thick, and too deep for the size of the thing in front of me. I shut the door and locked it. I did not say a word. Just went back to the table and watched the light dim under the threshold. That was when something hit the back door. Hard. I grabbed the flashlight again and ran around. Outside the rear entrance, nothing moved. But just below the window, I saw the marks. 4 claw-shaped streaks in the mud, arcing upward, almost to the handle. Whatever made them had been tall. I ran back to the front, flicked the light across the porch. The animal was gone. But the scratch marks it left on the wooden doorframe were fresh. I touched them without meaning to. Damp. Recent. I started backing up to bolt the entry tight again when I heard it. A soft scrape. This time, at the side wall. Near the kitchen. Near the second window I had forgotten to lock. I locked the kitchen window first. Then the back door again for good measure. My hands were shaking hard enough to rattle the flashlight beam. I grabbed the field knife from the counter and the emergency radio from the desk, though I knew no one would hear me on it at this hour. The scratching moved along the wall. One slow drag. Then, silence. I crept to the loft and pulled up the feed from the motion cameras outside. The first few screens showed only fog. Then one camera, the one facing the tree line, flickered to life. Something was there. It was not a dog. It was a man. He crawled on all fours, moving in that same jerky rhythm I had mistaken for an animal. His back was hunched beneath what looked like a fur covering, matted and patchy. He stopped just before the porch and raised his head, staring straight into the lens. The eyes reflected pale, round, and far too still. The feed went black. I pulled the power cord out and held the knife close. The scratching stopped altogether. Then, from below, a single creak, the sound of weight on the porch steps. I told myself it was the wind. I said it out loud, like that could make it true. It's just the wind. The setndo. Then the latch on the back door clicked. I froze. I knew I had locked it. The door eased open by an inch. The flashlight beam trembled as I aimed it toward the sound. Nothing moved. Then, from the dark behind the door, a breath, deep and ragged. I stepped back slowly. My pulse thudded in my ears. The figure stepped into the light. The thing that had been crawling was now standing. He wore a mask made from the upper half of an animal's face, a wolf maybe, or something close to it. The fur clung to his skin with streaks of mud. His hands hung loose at his sides, one gripping what looked like a broken stick or bone. His chest heaved with slow, deliberate breaths. He tilted his head toward me. I lunged forward, the knife flashing. He caught the table instead, shoving it into my path. I slipped, hit the floor, and swung upward blindly. The blade scraped his arm. He howled, a sound halfway between a man's shout and a guttural animal cry. He rushed me. I kicked the chair into his legs, buying just enough space to grab the flashlight and swing it hard. The lens shattered against his shoulder. The light burst and died. For a heartbeat, everything went dark. Then, he was gone. The back door slammed open with a crack that split the frame. Cold air swept through the cabin, carrying the smell of soil and rain. I staggered to my feet, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser in front of it. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. When dawn came, I called the county sheriff on the emergency band. They arrived an hour later. The deputy found tracks in the mud, bare feet mixed with paw prints from some kind of large dog. Both led into the trees, where they vanished near the creek. I left the cabin that afternoon, packed the equipment, sent a report, and never went back. I still work in biology, but I teach now. Safer to study from a classroom window than from the woods. Even so, sometimes I hear it again. Late at night, when the wind shifts, a faint scratching at my door. Always 3 strokes. Slow. Deliberate. And each Halloween, since that night, someone leaves a muddy handprint by my gate, just high enough to reach the handle. I rented the basement unit of a big old house in Boone, North Carolina. Hardwood floors, low ceilings, and just enough damp in the corners to remind you that you were underground. It was quiet. A little too quiet, if I'm being honest. My name's Devin. I'm 29, and I edit podcasts for a living. Freelance mostly. Narration, cleanups, interviews, ambient tracks for true crime shows. The basement was meant to be temporary. Just a few months to get through the backlog. That first night, I heard static. It came while I was lying in bed. Just after 1, I sat up, thinking I had left something running. Maybe the white noise app or my old headphones still plugged in. But everything was off. Still, the sound kept on. Soft, steady, like a radio caught between stations. It didn't come from the walls. It came from the floor. I pressed my hand to the wood. It felt cool, but not vibrating. Just still. But when I leaned closer, I could hear it again. A faint hiss, broken now and then by something like a breath. A real one, not mine. I chalked it up to a wiring issue, maybe interference from something upstairs. I put on headphones and tried to ignore it. But the second night, I started recording. I set my mic down near the floorboards and let it run overnight. The next morning, I filtered the track for low noise. Right around the 2-hour mark, a shape formed in the waveform. A soft swell of static, followed by what sounded like a single exhale. I played it back 3 times, then a 4th. That breath was not mine. I checked the mic settings. No anomaly. No feedback loops. The laptop showed no apps running in the background. Just a clean 8-hour track with one strange moment. By night 3, the static had rhythm, not quite a pattern, but it came and went every 13 seconds. I set another recorder out and sat up in bed, watching the floor. The sound grew louder near the center of the room. I slid the rug aside and placed my ear flat against the wood. That was when I heard something drag. Heavy. Slow. As if a piece of furniture was being moved under the house. There was no basement beneath me, just the slab of the foundation. The landlord had said so himself. I stood up fast and checked the window. No light, no motion, just the same pale blur of moon through the glass. Each night after that, the static grew sharper. Not louder, sharper, like it was being tuned on purpose. I tried noise canceling. I tried sleeping at a friend's, but when I came back, the sound returned, always stronger on the nights I listened for it. On Halloween night, I set the recorder for a full 8-hour session. The room was cold and quiet, just the sound of air moving between the floorboards. I fell asleep sometime after 2, still wearing one earbud. At 3:02, I woke up. A soft pop, then a burst of hiss, like someone plugging into a live feed. I sat up. The lights flickered once. The floor shifted. Not a lot, but enough that I felt it in my knees. I opened the laptop, scrubbed through the file, and there it was. A voice, low and cracked, buried under the static. No one knows I'm still here. Then everything went dark. The circuit breaker clicked off. And under the floor, faint and pulsing, something flashed. A dull red light, blinking like a dying signal. I pulled the rug off completely and pried up the first loose board. The wood creaked, dry and brittle, but not rotten. I expected insulation or piping beneath. Maybe some crawl space vent. What I found was smooth concrete, cold and unbroken. The blinking light was gone. I tapped around the edges with the handle of a screwdriver. Nothing hollow. No cracks. But the moment I stood up, the laptop chimed behind me. A file was open. My audio software. But I hadn't touched it. A new track had appeared, time-stamped only seconds earlier. No name. No folder path. Just a waveform pulsing in and out. I clicked play. It started with breathing. Not mine. Then a voice. Slow and deliberate. You heard me. Now it's your turn. Say something. End a night. I shut the laptop hard. The floor creaked beneath me, even though I hadn't moved. I stared down at the board I had lifted and realized I had placed it back exactly as it was. Like I was afraid to let it stay open too long. That morning, I called the landlord. Told her there might be old equipment under the floor or some wiring loop causing feedback. She paused a long time before answering. You're in the basement, right? Dawn erased. Yeah. Things, she said. No one ever lasts in that unit more than 6 weeks. You've been there, what, 4? Odes exited. I told her I was leaving. She said nothing. Just hung up. That night, the static didn't come. The floor stayed still. The lights never flickered. And that silence scared me more than anything else. At 3:17 the next morning, my phone buzzed. One voicemail. No number. I played it. The static returned. warping the first few seconds. Then, a voice. Mine. Speaking words I had never said. No one knows I'm still here. The same phrase, but now in my tone, my rhythm, like it had learned the shape of my voice. The floorboards beneath me cracked once, not a full break, more like a shift, a joint pulling slightly apart, then another, each soft pop syncing perfectly with the words I had just heard. I dropped to my knees and slammed the board I had loosened the night before. It splintered this time, clean through. I peeled it back and found nothing underneath, just concrete. But I still heard it, not through my ears, from inside my head. Now I'm above the floor. And that, I packed within the hour. Left the house while it was still dark and never came back. I changed states, changed equipment, even stopped editing for 2 months. But it did not matter. Because some nights, around 3 a.m., when I work too long with headphones on, it returns. A thin ribbon of static, a soft breath, and one sentence, always buried deep in the waveform. I'm still here, in your voice, waiting.